So we are on Chaf Aleph, Chaf Hey Amud Aleph, 25a. In the midst of our discussion, an inquiry, a question that was posed in the study hall sometime back in Talmudic age. And the question is as follows. Considering that the Gemara says elsewhere, Talmud says elsewhere, that if a woman, if a wife voluntarily decides to leave the faith, and thus she leaves the religious context of the marriage and union that the two have agreed upon at the time of marriage, so then this is grounds for divorce. And in addition, she loses the ketubah. She forfeits her right to claim the money of the ketubah. As we explained, the basic idea is, because the ketubah is a contract that is meant to protect her against the husband willy-nilly divorcing her. And thus we make it cost him a little bit. So he thinks twice before he divorces. As such, in a case where the religious context of their relationship is broken down, and therefore, from the Torah perspective, there's no reason to financially burden him to stay in the marriage. Although, as we'll learn soon, if he wants to, he could stay in the marriage. But we're not going to impose that financial burden to keeping them in the marriage, considering that she left the faith. And thus, he can divorce her and she loses her ketubah. This is what we learned elsewhere. That is to say, the Gemara is citing to a different Gemara which discusses that. Our Gemara wants to know if this woman requires warning before she loses the ketubah. Does she have to be warned and told? You should know that your behavior now, in which you're behaving irreligiously, in terms of modesty, that's why I refer to it as the religious context of their marriage, your behavior is going to lead to a divorce and will lead you to lose your ketubah. Does she have to get that warning before she loses her ketubah? That was our question. Or it's self-understood to begin with, she loses the ketubah even without a warning. This is the discussion. And the logic we know back and forth, there's good reason to assume either way. On the one hand, give her a warning so that hopefully she changes her ways. On the other hand, perhaps you don't need a warning, it's already factored in to their understanding to begin with. And the question is where the halacha stands. On which side of the coin does the halacha stand? So the Gemara is in the midst of raising a number of sources that will support one way or the other. And all of the sources that the Gemara raises are essentially quotes from our Mishnah here in Talmud Sotah. The first quote the Gemara raised to solve this issue, which is what we discussed yesterday, is the question of the engaged woman and the woman who's waiting for a deceased husband to consummate the marriage. So these women are partially married to their husbands, not completely. In that case, our Mishnah implied that a warning can be issued by the betrothed or by the intended. A warning can be issued, telling her not to seclude herself with such and such a person, considering that there's a suspicion of their relationship. And we're also told that this woman loses her ketubah. So the Gemara wanted to link that the reason why she's given a warning is because that's the only way for her to lose her ketubah. And that would have resolved their issue. That ketubah cannot be lost unless there's a warning. To which the Gemara replied by saying, nope. It's true she loses her ketubah, but it's not as a result of the warning. She loses her ketubah simply because she engaged in a suspicious relationship. She secluded herself with a person that we are suspicious of her behavior, but not because of the warning. That she would have lost her ketubah anyway. The warning is for another reason. The warning effectuates either one, that he is now forbidden to be with her because he warned her and she violated the warning and behaved suspiciously. She secluded herself with such and such a man, and therefore the two are forbidden to be together. Or number two, the reason why the warning is necessary is because as a result of this warning, now what was our papa's reason? Where is it?
I think it was the marriage is dissolved, right?
That the two of them are forbidden to be with each other. And the second one is that after they get married, take her to the temple to drink the water as a result of the warning earlier. Meaning to say, so they're engaged, He warns her, seclude yourself with so-and-so. They get married. Then she goes and secludes herself with that person. So the seclusion happened while they were fully married. The warning happened before they were fully married. And he could take her to the temple to drink that water to verify what happened behind closed doors. In this case, there's value to the warning that's during the time of engagement, because it allows for him to take her to the temple after they're married. The main point here is that we have no definitive proof that the warning is necessary in order for her to lose her ketubah. It's possible that the warning is there for other halachic ramifications. But as far as losing the ketubah, just misbehavior itself warrants ketubah even without a warning. This is where we are at the moment. Okay, so if that wasn't clear, please interrupt me and we go forward. Okay, good. So then, basically what we're at is back to square one. Does a woman who is misbehaving in terms of willingly leaving the religious context of their marriage, and therefore she forfeits the right to her ketubah, does she need a warning to lose the ketubah or not? This is what we're back to, which is square one. So now the Gemara quotes another part of our Mishnah as a possible solution to this problem. Amar Rava, Rava says, Tashma, come and listen to the next quote, which might help us resolve the issue. Namely, Almana Lokayan Gadol. The Mishnah states that if a widow is married to a high priest, Gerusha v'chalutza, if a divorced woman or a woman who went through the chalitza process, that is to say, she divorced the brother-in-law after her husband died, instead of consummating the marriage, they divorced, but through this process called chalitza. And this woman is now married to a kohen, so essentially a widow to a high priest, or a divorcee to a priest, to a regular kohen, hedjit, to an ordinary kohen. Likewise, mamzeres v'nesina, a woman born of an illegitimate relationship. And a nesina is a certain group of people that were Jewish by law, but they were banned from being married to ordinary Jews because of a history with King David. So this woman, who is a Jew, she's a Jewish woman, but there's an illegitimacy to her birth, or there's an illegitimacy to her birth, essentially, for whatever reason. And she's married the Yisrael to an ordinary Jew. Likewise, the reverse, Bas Yisrael, an ordinary good Jewish girl, Lamam Zivanosin, who's born to a man who's born from an illegitimate birth. So the common denominator between all these cases, the high priest to the widow, the ordinary priest to the divorcee, the illegitimate girl or the illegitimate guy married to the legitimate girl, legitimate guy. I shouldn't say illegitimate guy. He's a good guy. A man born of an illegitimate relationship, we should say. The common denominator between all these cases are that by Torah law, they shouldn't have been married, but the marriage still takes effect. Just to make this clear, we discussed this when we learned the Mishnah, but just to recap. If a brother betroths a sister, they don't need to divorce to separate, because the marriage never took any effect. So there's no reason to write a bill of divorce. If a guy can go to his sister, give her a ring in front of witnesses and say, you're married to me, and the act was meaningless from a halakhic perspective, and they don't need a divorce. But then there are relationships, which Torah says you should not have this relationship. But if you did get married, then the marriage is valid, and you require a bill of divorce to separate. That's the case with these relationships here. A person born of an illegitimate relationship that marries a person who's born of an ordinary relationship, an ordinary legitimate halachic relationship, they shouldn't marry each other. But if they did, the marriage is affected, and thus they need a divorce in order to separate. Likewise, a kohen who marries a divorcee, Torah says they shouldn't get married, but if they did, they still require a divorce, a guilt, and separate. And the same thing is true of a kohen to a widow. Now the question becomes, this relationship, which Torah says you shouldn't have got married, but now that you're married, you actually are halachically married, can this woman become a Sotah? Considering that we learned that in order for a woman to qualify as a Sotah, they have to be a valid couple. And this, even though they are valid, but not fully, because Torah says, hey, they shouldn't have got married. So what's the halacha? Said our Mishnah, loy shoisos because Torah says you shouldn't have got married, therefore they cannot be taken to the temple to drink the water as an ordinary Sotah. So they don't fully qualify as Sotah, because Torah says this marriage shouldn't have happened. And in order to qualify as a Sotah, they have to be married in such a way that Torah says, yes, this is a marriage that we want. And because this is not a marriage that Torah says we want, in fact, Torah says you shouldn't have got married, therefore, she cannot become a Sotah, she cannot be taken to the temple to drink the water. But she doesn't get a ketubah. Again, for the same reason. The ketubah is there to keep him tethered to the marriage so that he doesn't willy-nilly divorce. But in this case, where she behaved promiscuously because she was warned not to seclude herself, and she went down and did seclude herself, so she forfeits her right to the ketubah. End quote from our Mishnah. Now it's comments Rava and says this could be a possible resolution to our question. Because because their relationship is such that Torah says you shouldn't have got married, therefore she cannot drink the waters of the Sotah, she cannot be taken to she doesn't qualify to be taken to the temple to drink the Sotah waters. But a warning, Mikanila, this high priest can warn his wife, who was a widow from another marriage, he can warn her against secluding herself. And likewise, the Kohen can warn his wife, who is a divorcee before they got married. He can warn her against secluding herself. And likewise, the person born of an illegitimate relationship to the girl who's born of a legitimate relationship, or the reverse. In all of these cases, the marriage is valid enough that he can issue a warning, but it isn't valid enough that he can then take her to the temple if she violates the warning to drink the water. Now, again, the question becomes, Ulamai, to what end is he warning her? The Mishnah is implying that in this case, the case of a marriage where the marriage has taken effect, but Torah says it shouldn't have happened, what would be the purpose? What would be the halachic ramification of this warning? If you're going to know why this warning is necessary, because now he warned her, if she violates the warning by secluding herself with this person, they're forbidden to be with each other. That's what the Gemara suggested earlier, right? The reason why there's value to the engaged man's warning to his is because by warning, and then she violates the warning, now they're forbidden to be with each other. So maybe it's getting here. But the reason why there's value to the high priest warning his wife, who is a former widow, or the priest, the Kohen, warning his wife, who's a former divorcee, what's the value in that warning? Because if she violates the warning, they're forbidden to be with each other. If that's what Gemara suggests, says the Gemara, already forbidden to be with each other. So that cannot be the value of the warning here, simply to make them forbidden to each other, because they're anyways forbidden to each other. If that's the case, what's the value of this warning? What's the value of the warning in a case where they anyways can't be with each other? Is not then because that's the only way for her to lose her ketubah. What other value could be to the warning in a case where they're anyways not allowed to live with each other? But this, says Rava, this is a possible solution. This is a possible proof that before a woman loses her ketubah, warning is required. Now, is that clear? It's not interrupt me. Clear? Okay. So again, let's just go through this quickly to recap. The Mishnah stated that a couple that whose marriage has been qualified halachically, but Torah says they shouldn't have been married. This couple, there is value to him warning her not to seclude herself. That's what the Mishnah declares. There's value to that. The question, what value is there? In other cases, we would say the value is that as a result of the warning, they cannot be together with each other after she violates the warning. But in this instance, where they're anyways not allowed to be with each other because Torah says you shouldn't get married, and Torah is expecting them to please divorce, the warning doesn't effectuate that they shouldn't be with each other. They anyways can't be with each other. So to what end would the Mishnah say there's value to the warning of this husband? It must therefore be because the warning is what allows her to forfeit her ketubah. And thus, this seemingly is a proof that in order for a woman to lose her ketubah as a result of misbehaving, she must first be warned.
Levi, if a Kohen is not allowed to marry a divorced woman or a widow, and he does get married, who's going to marry him?
You mean like which rabbi would do it?
Yeah, which rabbi would do it?
So the truth is, no rabbi should do it. Unfortunately, there are that do, but more importantly, the rabbi oversees the marriage, but the rabbi doesn't do the marriage. The marriage is the result of witnesses that witness the husband giving the woman a ring and saying the proper words. So in theory, if the let's say the husband is a scholar enough, he can draft his own ketubah and organize his own wedding. The rabbi officiating. We do have rabbis officiating because the groom, even if he's a scholar, is preoccupied and he's not going to be busy with making sure that all the legalities of his wedding is taken care of. So you have an officiating rabbi to oversee the legalities. But theoretically, all the legalities can get done even without the presence of a rabbi. So in this theoretical case, they would be married by Torah law, even though they shouldn't. Yeah. The question. Yeah.
But you're saying that they're not allowed to be together even if there was no warning by Torah law?
Right. Every day they're together. Torah is expecting them. You should separate.
Okay. All right.
The marriage has taken effect. So it's kind of like strange middle ground.
So then the warning in these instances is clear that the warning is the reason for why she loses her ketubah.
Because otherwise, what value is there to this warning? Why is the Mishnah giving him the
right? Yeah. Exactly.
Exactly. Why is the Mishnah telling him, "Oh, you should go warn her"? Like, there's value to your warning. What value is there if they anyways are not supposed to be together?
Right. But the other cases, you can make the argument that it's for other reasons that the warning is being issued.
That's correct. When it comes to the engaged woman, as we explained yesterday, and we recapped this morning, there's other value to his warning. As a result of the warning, now they're not allowed to live together. So there's other halachic ramifications to the warning. But in this case, what halachic ramification is there to the warning if they anyways can't be together? Either the ramification is she loses her ketubah, and thus this would be a proof that in order for a woman to lose her ketubah, she must be warned.
So how do these, just as a side, how do these couples, for example, how do they live together when Torah prohibits it in practice?
It's a relationship that's recognized as sinful. Recognized relationship as sinful.
And it's interesting, Rabbi, how the Halachikally resolved this. We were discussing yesterday that the husband who did not divorce her, but if she repented, if she did tshuva, then he can write her a second ketubah because of tshuva. It's just an amazing thing that there's even a provision for that was made, that was accepted by the Rabbanim.
Yeah, but we're going to see, God willing, maybe next week we're going to see the Gemara is going to get into more details about what happens if a husband says, "I don't mind that my wife is behaving like this. I want to stay with her anyway." We're going to get into that soon. Okay, so let's see now. Continues the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda from a place called Diskarta says like this. No, the value of the warning is not to make her lose her ketubah. There's another halachic ramification to the warning, not related to ketubah. Meaning to say, it's possible she loses a ketubah just by dint of the fact that she misbehaved and she behaved suspiciously. That itself is enough to lose a ketubah. If so, what's the value of the warning? It certainly cannot be to make them forbidden to each other because they're anyways forbidden to each other. So what's the value of the warning? Says everybody from Diskarta. I think I'm pronouncing that place correctly. The value of the warning is to make her forbidden to the one with which she behaved suspiciously. Just like she's forbidden to her own husband. To explain. It's not because we learned in the Mishnaic text later in the Gemara. Shem Shasur Labal, in the same way, her promiscuity makes her forbidden to be living with her husband. So too, Asura Laboyo, she's forbidden to be married to the one with which she was suspected. Meaning to say, let's say a couple is married, a legitimate couple, no issue with their relationship, halachically speaking. And she becomes a Sotah. He warns her, don't seclude yourself for so-and-so. She goes ahead and secludes herself anyway. Now, she's a bona fide Sotah. Consequently, she's forbidden to be with her husband. Okay. Now, this Mishnah adds, what happens if the husband dies?
I'm sorry, can I interrupt for a second? It's just that reason doesn't hold for these specific cases because they're already forbidden.
One second. Wait, 1 second. That's what I'm saying. A bona fide regular relationship. Right? Regular. No, you're right. Which is why I'm diverting for a second. It's
Okay,
it's a regular relationship. It's halachically speaking, perfectly sound relationship. And she becomes a Sotah, and now they're forbidden to each other. Good. Now, says the Mishnah, if let's say the husband dies now, so she never drank the water. We don't know what happened behind closed doors. But theoretically, she's forbidden to be with her husband. Or let's say they decide they don't want to drink the Sotah water, right? They don't want to go through it. We discussed that. They can back out. So they backed out. But now they're forbidden to be with each other because she was a bona fide Sotah. It says the Mishnah, if the husband dies now, so she's a single girl, she may not marry the man about which she was suspected. She may not marry that man because the premise of their relationship, of their union, is built on infidelity, essentially, because she was suspiciously behaving, at least, maybe even full-on infidelity during their first marriage. So we impose like a knas, like a punishment, basically. We impose a penalty and tell her, you can't marry that guy. And the point of this is a deterrence. Now, women shouldn't think, while I'm in this marriage, let me hang out with some other guy. And just in case this one doesn't work out, I got another guy back up. So it says to her, no, you can't marry that guy either. Okay. So now that's the law of that Mishnah. Now let's take that law, says Rabbi Yehuda of Diskarta, and apply it to this case. In the case of the Kohen who's married to a widow, or a high priest who's married to a widow, or an ordinary Kohen married to a divorcee, or some other illegitimacy in the relationship because one of the two of the spouses are born of an illegitimate birth. So their marriage took effect, but Torah says you shouldn't have been married. So says Rabbi Yehuda, the warning that he issues and tells her, do not seclude yourself with that man. And then she goes ahead and does. It's true that warning is not valuable enough to make him forbidden to her because they're anyways forbidden to be together. But what it does do is it makes her forbidden to the one with which she was suspected. That it does help. And therefore, because we've now found another halachic ramification to this warning, we now therefore back to square one. We have no definitive proof that the warning is the reason she lost the ketubah. Maybe the reason she lost the ketubah is because she misbehaved irrespective of the warning. As for what's the value of the warning effectuates that she is not allowed to marry that person about which she was suspected. So back to square one.
but I thought that the reasoning was just like the husband is forbidden, she's forbidden to be with her husband. She's also forbidden to be with the third party, but you can't make that argument because that man was never
allowed to begin with.
Because of the Torah prohibition of that relationship. So I don't know if that's where I was going with that.
Yes, so that's the chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda.
Okay.
They phrases it as such, the same way she's forbidden to her husband, she's also forbidden to that guy. Says Rabbi Yehuda, don't attach the two together. That just happens to be the phrasing in the Mishnah because in this case that happened. But the real reason why she cannot be with that new guy is because she was warned. So you could apply it to a case of, let's say, these cases here, where to begin with, the initial couple was forbidden to each other. I suppose Rabbi Yehuda of Diskarta.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Very good. Okay, we'll stop over here. And the Gemara, on God willing, on Monday is going to introduce the final passage of our Mishnah, and that's going to become the definitive deciding proof that indicates that a woman does indeed need warning before she loses a ketubah. That's going to be the conclusion, God willing, we'll come to on Monday based on the last passage of our Mishnah. Yeah, you want to say something?
So
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. So when it comes to the guy, the laws are a bit different. I don't want to answer the question outright, but there's I don't have a direct source for it, so I don't want to answer, but there's reason to say it's different. And the basic reason is because by rabbinic law, a man may not marry more than one woman. But by biblical law, he can. So it makes it a little bit more difficult the other way. Right? So by rabbinic law, you'd be right. That's why I'm saying I don't want to, because I haven't read any definitive sources on this question, so I don't want to answer.
I have a question also.
Go ahead, Ellen.
Months ago, we discussed this stuff, and they were always talking about witnesses and witnesses and witnesses, and now they don't mention any witnesses.
Right. So at this point, we assume whenever we say now that she qualifies as a Sotah, it means she qualifies with all the requisites mentioned in the previous chapters about witnesses.
Okay.
Whatever witnesses were required in the previous chapters applies to her, and now we're just getting to the next. It's like as if like the mission is going in stages. It started off at the beginning describing the warning, then describing the seclusion, then describing the going to the temple, and now describing the ramifications. So the ramifications discussed here assumes that everything that discussed before already happened. So all the witnesses we talked about before have already been done, and now it's just a question of what are the ramifications. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay, very
Good
good.
class.
Thank you. So wonderful Shabbos and a wonderful day. It's great to see you.
All the very best to you, Rabbi. Thank you, Shikoah.
Good.
Shabbos, all the very best to you all. God bless you all. Take care.
You too, Judge. All the best.
God bless.
Good Shabbos.
Thank you.
And a good
Shabbos.
Shabbos to everybody.